welcome to the Learning Lever yet again. We're back with Armaan Ahluwalia, our fearless operating expert in partnerships, among other things. Today, we're going to talk a little bit of partnership, a little bit of the past, a little bit of the present, a lot of the future, and what that might look like. Armaan's been helping us for quite a long time. He's one of the early operating experts that helped us out. And I believe you're in London right now, if that's correct. Yes?
Yeah, that is correct. Yeah,
I
no, I'm
love it. We're
excited to
on
be
time
here.
zone stuff. Okay, well, first off, I definitely want to start with, first of all, thank you for being here, man. It's been a
Yeah, of
while, and it's
course.
great to reconnect in this way. I appreciate the time. I want to start with, give us that once over your past, current
Mhm.
priorities, your life, your career, kind of where you're at, your intro of kind of you, and then, of course, leading us into the world of business of sports, somewhere along that pathway.
Yeah, absolutely. So, for those that can see this virtually, if or the video,
Yeah.
I've got a bunch of Canadian sort of is things behind me. I'm born and raised in Canada. Was fortunate to go to school on the east coast of Canada. Knew I wanted more education. San Diego State had a MBA program that focused in sports business. So for me, more education, more learning, more opportunity to really sharpen the tools was a great opportunity for me. So I went there, fell in love with the program. It was a essentially 18-month program, so a sprint. So really helped me learn how to learn, but at the same time also manage my schedule. I think that was probably the best
Yeah.
learning I had amongst the great classmates and the interesting stuff as well. But when you do 7 courses at once at a high level,
Yeah.
you really learn how to manage your time and do things quite effectively, which has been definitely a huge skill of mine. So initially wanted to come back to Canada. They were hosting the 2015 Women's World Cup in
Okay.
Winnipeg, where I'm from, and I was like, that was my, moment where I was like, I got to work in sports. That's what I want to do. Ended up taking an internship, an unpaid internship in Kansas City, doing suite
Okay.
servicing hospitality, which was amazing. Learned so much. They hired me 5 weeks in. I guess they must have liked me. Maybe differing
We can see
accords
why. We
there,
know why.
records there. Yeah. Ended up doing 6 years in Kansas City and had a lot of different
Yeah.
roles. And I was really fortunate to work with some amazing people who I keep in touch with, who have moved on, and still some that are still there, which is amazing. And was part of the team that did naming rights there. So GHA Field at Arrowhead Stadium was an amazing opportunity. And then felt like I wanted to try something new and had an opportunity with an old mentor of mine that had moved to BSE Global with a big leadership change and took the opportunity kind of on a whim and moved out to Brooklyn, which I'd only ever been once to New York City and once to Manhattan, never actually to Brooklyn specifically.
Okay.
So
So
that
we're
was a big jump.
Canada, San Diego, Kansas City. Now
Yeah.
we're into New York.
And then was part of a team that did one of the largest jersey patch deals at that time with Weeble, which was amazing. Learned so many great skills, met some amazing more people there, and then one of the people that I know in the industry reached out and said, hey, we're building this opportunity here with Alpine F1 in the UK. What do you think? And I was like, well, I'm a dual citizen. I would love to move to the UK and try something new. And so
That's awesome.
took an opportunity with Alpine F1, and then I've been in the UK ever since. And that's kind of where I'm at today.
That's amazing. So first off, right off the bat, I noticed you hit on the thing that we're going to talk, learning all the time, new
Yeah,
skills, new knowledge, new learning. That's what we're all about, of course. But
always.
also, you kind of called out the people every level too. The people at the school, the people at Kansas City. Like it really is the nature of everything about the business. All business maybe, but certainly in the business of sport, knowledge, skills, experience, and then who do you know? Who have you talked to? And for you to kind of hit multiple cities, multiple teams, that's not uncharacteristic of the industry, I would say, but certainly the the breadth of what you've covered is not standard. What do you think about the progression, and how do you look at going from sport to sport, organization to organization? Like, how important is that in your development, and how much is that starting over in some ways, where you're literally like, okay, it's a whole new world in some ways? Like, how do you kind of explain that to folks that are maybe thinking about making the transfer from sport A to B? What would you say to them? Like, stay, go, do it. What's the advice?
Yeah. So I'll hit on one of the first points you made there earlier, which was, yeah, like learning has been a huge part of my career, and growing up in a household where education was extremely top priority, and that's a lot of what it revolved around, was extremely important for me growing up. And so I had that hunger to want to try to learn and learn as much as possible. I think I took the Gallup poll strength finders. I've taken it twice in my life.
Okay.
And one of the
Nice.
skills that was both in there, I mean, analytical, yes, of course, people that
Sure.
have met me will know that. But one of them was like individualization, which is like how things and people fit together. And so for me, it's I want to learn about people, I want to learn what makes them tick, and I want to
Yeah.
learn how we can get better and grow and develop together. And so I've been fortunate that throughout my career, I've been really around amazing people that share those similar beliefs, and that's where I've thrived. I've always said that I want to do great things with great people. And sometimes when that's out of balance, it causes me to rethink about what maybe may be out there from a new opportunity in that sense. To answer your question on, moving from the NFL to the NBA to Formula One, look, I've been extremely fortunate that I've had great people that have pulled me into those opportunities, and I've
Nice.
been, honored to kind of join them and join on that quest. And the thing I would say is that like for me, someone told me very early on in sports, you kind of have to move out to move up. Now, I don't necessarily know if I fully wholeheartedly believe that, but I think there is some truth to that. And
Yeah.
so I've always thought about what do I want to do at the end of the day? And, I've got a couple of goals, and a lot of them are to do with Canadian sports entities and running them and
Yeah.
whatnot. And I always think about when I interview for that role eventually, how can I make it a clear slam dunk that I am the best candidate for that role? And I think about how do I make myself as well rounded as possible? Is that learning certain skills? Is it learning certain parts of the trade? I mean, even when I look at C-level people around the industry, I like to look at where they've come from, what they've done. Have they done one thing? Have they done different things? How did they add more responsibility? And again, someone told me the more responsibility you have, the quicker you're going to be able to move up the ladder and add more things and more people and more responsibility, different areas. That's how you
Yeah.
grow into a different opportunity. And so within Kansas City, as much as Kansas City has become the iconic NFL global brand, at the time it was very regional. And it's not to
Yeah.
say that's a bad thing. It was just that I learned how to do the amazing skills, the blocking and tackling, if you will,
Nice.
really well. And then moving to Brooklyn was okay, Brooklyn is a huge metropolis area in New York City, and it's a global sport in the basketball, which gave me a unique perspective. Working for Formula One, which is probably arguably one of the most global sports on the planet because they race in so many unique markets, was another interesting experience for me to kind of add more and more experience so that now when I speak to people, I have the perspective of,
Yeah.
oh, well, yeah, when we were in Kansas City, we did this, or at Alpine, we did this, or with the Nets or the Liberty, we were able to do those things. And I think it's important. I was listening to somebody who was talking about a general manager where they were going to hire someone in professional sports, and they said he's been at the same place for his entire career, but he's had different leaderships and he's changed. So he's seen things done differently.
Yeah.
During my time in Kansas City, there was a fair bit of different people that came and went, which is totally fine. But everyone brought a different style, a different opportunity for me to learn. Oh, I really like how that person does that. I'm going to steal that because I'm going to use that. And so over time, I've slowly started to take the best skills and the best attributes from different people as I continue to round and develop myself to be what I can hope to be is the best version possible.
As you have clearly with the I took
Still
your
work in
course on,
progress.
but absolutely we all are, of course. I think I want to drill in a little bit on that concept of moving out to move up, and I
Yeah.
think you did a good job of balancing like out and up versus even if you stay somewhere, new people, new regime changes, you can get new perspective at the same place. You can get new perspective by moving to new places. Let's talk about partnership a little bit though, in
Mhm.
that it seems to be to someone who's newer to the industry, a couple
Mhm.
years in, it's one of the more diversified areas when you go from org to org, team to team, league to league. There's a lot of nuance from the outside looking in, and there's a lot of levels of, oh, we want, activation, we want the buzzwords are all there,
Mhm.
but the definitions of those buzzwords seems to be different when I hear a little bit more depth and have a little bit of a deeper talk. So when you think about partnership today and where it's going, what's the low end of that? in terms of like where are the teams and the leagues that are like still kind of at that base level starting that journey, and then where is the cutting edge next steps of what true future partnerships look like in this industry?
Yeah, so I think if I think about it more broadly, the industry has changed so much even since I've been in it. And again,
Yeah.
my professional career hasn't been super tenured yet, and I'm excited to see where it takes us. But if I think about what partnerships have been, and again, I have a book somewhere on my shelf here, which talks about the first partnerships, right, and sponsorships, which was radio, right? Like
Of course.
radio
Yeah.
was the original medium where people would sponsor. And so that changed to television. And I think this is an oversimplification, but partnerships used to be very centered around a very egotistical, oh yeah, I would love to have my name on the outfield sign, or like I would love to be associated with this team. And
Yeah.
deals usually got done over a handshake and a steak dinner. Now, what I've seen in the last, let's call it 10 years, is brands are starting to bring real ROI expectations to the table.
Yeah.
And what that means is that not only is it the expectation because of what has existed through social media. For example, if you guys spend on LinkedIn or Facebook or Instagram or TikTok, you can see down to the penny and down to the specific type of demographic you want
Yeah.
to reach. And so where I see this going is creating this one-to-one experiences using sponsorship or partnership, however you want to think about it. I think they're different but similar.
Yeah.
And trying to reach the end consumer. Because at the end of the day, right, sponsorship is to get your message out there, whether that's to change brand perception, to reach a certain type of clientele, whatever it may be, right? All those buzzwords you talked about. It's thinking through how can we do that as effectively and as cost efficient. And traditionally, social media has been really, really good at that. Now, social media is a numbers game, and 1,000 impressions might not reach the right people. Whereas sports teams now, properties, rights holders, leagues are starting to get smarter and bring that to the table where they can say, right, we know how many fans have dogs. If you're a pet brand, great, let's reach those people where they are in an authentic way. And I think, again, one of the great big stories I've seen change in the last 10 years is this authentic storytelling that makes sense. When you tell a partnership, it feels authentic. It doesn't feel forced. So one
Yeah.
of the things that was really interesting for me going to Formula One was hearing people talk about safety and security and the technology, and it's all very competitive. So cybersecurity is naturally a great partner in that
Makes sense.
space, that
Yeah.
there's actually a need to make sure that designs and strategy is not being leaked or stolen by other teams. Now, I'm not saying it's malicious on any team, but
No, 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 of
those
course.
sorts of things, you want to keep it secure, right? Like you want to keep that information in house, and so a cybersecurity partner can create an amazing, authentic story that would be
Yeah.
really fun to tell and show and reach those types of consumers and show people to say, well, if it's good enough for XYZ team, it's good enough for my company, right?
Yeah, absolutely. With that, what would be, give me an example maybe of one of the partnerships you've seen, maybe not even one of your own. We can kind of just like that you've
Sure.
seen,
Yeah.
like the security for, say, F1 or cybersecurity for F1. What would be one of the other ones you've seen in your experience? You're like, they got it right. That makes sense. That is like the model of, oh gosh, whoever came up with that is doing the right thing. Do you have one that comes to mind?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two. So there's
Okay.
one which was, I'll say them quickly so that it doesn't drag on too long. But
Sure.
there was one with the Winnipeg Jets when they came back. So my hometown hockey team, they did a partnership with Budweiser, or they had a partnership with Budweiser. And one of the activation campaigns they did was, in order to brew beer, you need water. And Winnipeg has where two rivers meet, the Forks and the Assiniboine, or it's called the Forks, it's the Assiniboine and the Red River. It's very
Okay.
historic in that part area. They went around and they collected water from the tap or wherever from around Manitoba to tell the story. And then they brewed the beer with that water. And so it was like the
All right.
hometown beer brewing. Now again, I'm speeding over certain parts of it, but essentially it flew off the shelves. They couldn't keep it. The other campaign and authentic partnership, I think, which is really interesting, was around P&G and the Olympics around the campaigns around moms. And right, like every athlete has a mom, and they all got there in in part of with their mom and sort of thanking them for that experience, which I thought was such a powerful campaign. But both examples are campaigns of an effective use of IP and rights as a way to authentically connect with
Sure.
those people. And so I think about those two, which have stood out and stood the test of time. That Winnipeg campaign was from 2012 or something. And then
Yeah.
the PNG one, I think, was 2016 Olympics, maybe even earlier. So again, those sort of campaigns come around only a little bit in a while. And it's impressive when you can build that amazing storytelling to back up the authentic insights and sort of data that tells you this will work.
Yeah, I think that's been one of my kind of novice approaches in seeing partnerships. It's
Mm-hmm.
when there's that natural fit too. I'm partial to these partnerships that affect part of the in-game experience where you see something, you're like, oh, this makes sense. They're doing a thing that relates to the part. Like, I Bay Area guy, so Levi
Sure.
Stadium, Yahoo Fantasy Football sponsored a lounge for a long
Yeah.
time, and the fantasy scores were up there. I was like, what a
Yeah.
perfect way to get that
Yeah.
synergy. And then I was traveling in St. Louis, and they had the I think it was Purina. I better look that up.
Yes.
But the
The
the,
Purina
the
Lounge where
partnership,
you
and
could
then
bring
they
your
had
dogs. Yeah.
the dogs in the stadium. I was like, these are brilliant, clever, thoughtful ways of really merging these visions and getting the best out of it versus. And again, not to put too fine a point on it, but I think I saw something recently where Savannah Bananas were taking signs out of their in their stadiums originally to get away from some of that
Mhm.
and think of different ways of partnering. So I think it's one of those areas that's the shallow slap it on doesn't work the same way maybe, and maybe it
Correct.
does work, maybe that's part of the game, but there is a next level that's showing up and it's exciting and interesting.
Yeah, I would say that yes, the logo slap, as it's called in the industry, is a solution. It is a way to do it. It could be right for that brand, but what we've seen is that the game has been continued to be raised and will
Yeah.
continue to be raised. And so if you want to do that, you potentially could be wasting a lot of money kind of working with an authentic a rights holder, which could potentially be better used in that sense as well too. So yeah.
That's one other interesting one. So I've had some conversation with teams in trying to figure out how to leverage our learning,
Hmm.
and there is something where the the small team of business folks within an organization can become somewhat isolated, and they do something because that's how they've always done it. That seems to be going away a little bit, but not as fast as I would have guessed from the outside. Like, what's your perception of what percentage, and that's probably not fair, but do you see a fair amount of teams that are still sitting on way too much opportunity at this point? Or do you think it's more people are getting it and they're catching up, and it's a little bit farther along maybe than maybe I see it through some of my limited discussions?
So look, I think strides are made in different different time horizons, and I
Okay.
think that teams which have historically been run like mom and pop shops
Fair.
with these billion-dollar valuations
Also fair.
are slowly starting to realize that they need to up their games. They need to up whatever it is internally, hiring more people, hiring different skill sets to kind of compete.
Yeah.
Because, and again, I don't necessarily love this analogy, but sometimes teams, when they're meeting with brands, they bring a knife to a gunfight. And again, like I hate the violence of it. I've got to find a better analogy, but the concept is like you're not bringing the same type of equipment to the meeting to discuss. Okay, well, what is your customer lifetime value? How many people are here? How are they engaging with you?
Yeah.
Are the what is the difference between a fan that lives in Hawaii and buys a jersey every year to the fan that lives in the market but
Yeah.
doesn't go to a game and only watches on free over the air? How is that any different? What are you thinking about those? And so I would say, like, one of the things that showed me that there's a huge gap to grow is that private equity is coming into these sports and
Yeah.
investing in them with these properties. And what I mean by that is that they see an underutilized opportunity, right? Private equity doesn't invest just to invest. Now, look, sports franchises are great holds, and maybe they are growing in investments. It's a good way to put a good return. But there's obviously a lot of efficiencies that can be improved. Now, As for a percentage, I think that's,
Yeah.
quite a very
Bad
difficult
question.
one. But the one thing that no, I wouldn't say it's a bad question. I think it's a great question to figure out where the opportunity
Fair.
is. Now, we can't solve it in this sort of podcast, but one of the things I
What if we
think
could,
about,
though? I mean,
I
honestly,
mean,
it would be
I mean,
amazing.
there'd be a great way to do it. I mean, like, give me a couple hours and I'm sure we could work through it. But like, it's one of the things where when I was at a team and when I was thinking about this is that when you work for a team, there's the business side and the actual team side. On the team side, and they couldn't be more different, and they're usually church and state separation. On the team side, they practice probably 90% of the time for 10% performance. On the business side, now this is an over exaggeration, bear with me here,
Yep.
is they practice 10% of the time for 90% performance. And that always seemed backwards to me. Now, I'm not saying we have the time to do 90% practice, but
Yeah.
10% is usually once a month HR puts on something, or you're lucky and you get to go to a conference. I was fortunate to go to one or so, which is where I met Moon at the Horizon
Yeah.
Summit so many years ago. Um, but it's unless you're doing your own learning and research, you're more than likely not going to get it from the team, the property internally because it's not a priority. And for me, it's a bit of a missed opportunity to develop the smart people you have and help them. And then again, I'm no HR person, but like I'm guessing if you offered that sort of stuff, it would provide more of a less retent or a higher retention rate, less turnover, and
Sure.
potentially greater outcomes. But again, that's just one person's perspective, and I happen to
Look,
be
we
on
know
a
I could
show that
talk
talks
about
about
that.
learning. So
I could talk about that for hours, clearly, but that's not mainly our primary today. I want to switch it up. Okay, so
yep.
I could talk partnership with you all day because honestly, it's still an area I'm learning and I love. I find it fascinating. And some of the ones that I've experienced are just, they've left impacts. Like I can say, I remember this stadium, I remember seeing this, and that was like, that's a cool thing to be able to dive into. And the last thing I'll say that's interesting for me is that you kind of alluded to it, but it's also where teams are realizing they need to build out all of their team. Like you can't just build out partnerships. You have to have BSA. You have to have your data. You have to have your customer experience. You have to have all of the pieces to show up prepared. It can't just be, hey, let's just get our partnership team to do more. It really is an organization maturing and an organization growing as a whole because you rely on all of the parts. And it's really tough to have great partnerships without great other elements of the business to lean and share what's happening and how it's happening. So I think it's important that you call that out. It's not a verticality that you can live in isolated and just drive. You need the rest of the group to do it. Let's talk learning for a minute here. When you think about your learning, you've mentioned at teams, you've talked about schooling, you've talked about, growing up with it. Can you think of a learning experience post college, I like to try and say, that was impactful in a way that you're like, I still think about that, or I still recall how that changed my perspective or the way I work or the way I think about things? Was there a business learning, a practical learning that left an impact and was invaluable to your career going forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think
And it could be formal or
there's,
informal, like
yeah,
quite
no,
honestly.
I mean, for me, I don't think there was a seminal moment. I think,
Okay.
look, I learned a lot during my time at San Diego State about networking and how to network effectively and think about that.
Nice.
But I think for me, it's a lot of this sort of self-guided learning. And what I mean by that is I think there's three different things that have been really instrumental in helping me continue to learn and push. So one of them was like to become an avid reader and read books. So during COVID, I was reading a book a week and then posting a
Nice.
review on LinkedIn about it. I've slowed down now, but I've certainly started to pick up more. And again, I come in waves where I get really excited. I mean, I read almost as many sports publications or business news publications as I can get my hands on every day. The other thing is like
How long are
podcasts,
you
which is
spending doing that? Like, how much time do you allocate to that on an average
so when
day,
I was
an
at a
average work day?
team, yeah, when I was at a team, I mean, probably 30 to 45 minutes a day at least.
Nice.
On podcasts, I'll probably listen to at least 2 hours of podcast a day, mainly because I do it on two times speed. so I can
Yeah.
listen in. Again, I speak quite quickly, so it makes it a little bit easier to listen
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
all the time. But essentially, I will listen to almost about 2 hours of podcasts, whether that be an economics podcast, a sports business podcast, and then maybe a sports podcast. I like to have some fun as well. And then the
Yeah.
other one I think, which has been really helpful, is like informational interviews. Sort of kind of what we're doing in
Yeah.
the sense of finding interesting people that have been very successful in their career and kind of picking their brain. And so those three things have been a great opportunity for me to continue to learn. And like, I learn by listening, I learn by seeing, I learn by doing. And so those three things, while I'm sure there are others, are kind of the culmination of what's been able to allow me to, when I sit in a room with any sports business executive or any person, I can bring up culturally relevant information. And I've really tried as hard as I can to be like, to know as much as I possibly can. I mean, I had
Awesome.
an executive call me one time and say, "Hey, do you know about this role coming up at like a president level?" And I was like, "Why are you asking me?" He goes, "Well, you seem to know a lot about everything." And I was like, "Well,
Fair enough.
let me go ask." And so,
Yeah.
I pride myself on knowing as much as I possibly can and being able to, chop it up with the best, basically.
I actually love the combination that you have there, like really breaking up the different media, like as far as like sports business, podcasting, book, like it's a thoughtful approach. And I don't know as though there's a right approach, but thoughtfulness being part of that is the secret. Like what works for you, what works for your schedule, what works for your preferences, I think is a very healthy way to look at lifelong learning, especially now when there's so much out there. I mean, so many books, so many podcasts, so many different articles and news, and some effectively amazing and some maybe not so much so. So getting into that flow where you know where to go to get good information, good context is a huge, huge asset. Okay. Two final thoughts. One, I feel remiss if I didn't ask you, is there a book that we should like plug that you've been reading or that stands out because of all the books you said you read and have reviewed? Is there one that we should tell people about while we're here?
Yeah, so actually, I got asked this question yesterday when I was chatting with a mentee of mine. Look, I think depending on what's important to you, the answer might change. But I
Of
think if I
course.
had to pick one, I would say like Good to Great really
Love it.
changed the way that I think fundamentally about leadership and how businesses are run. And so I still remember myself thinking about what I was actually reading and like what it meant and how I would show up in work and like what would make a 5-star leader,
Yeah.
and things like that. So I would say Good to Great was definitely one of them. I'm just looking around. And then the other one, which I think is a classic, which is How to Win Friends and Influence
Of
People by Dale
course.
Carnegie. Like there is a
Required
reason it's
reading.
been reprinted so many times.
Yeah.
And when I was at Alpine, we did a book club and they were kind of like, "Oh, like, really? This is from the 1930s?" And I was like, "Guys, it
Still
doesn't
relevant.
matter.
Half the books are
Ignore the
based
fact
on
that
that book.
he's, going to a gala and a ball, riding the streetcar. Like, just think about it as a subway instead, right?" And, those lessons will propel you. Because I think if you
Yeah.
build good relationships with people, like I've mentioned earlier in this podcast, which has been cemental to, which has been so important to my career, like
Yeah.
that's the great foundation for that.
That's a good one. That's one of those base books too, because if you search for that book, you get 9 others that you probably would be interested in as well, because it's a required in the list when you start putting these things together. I'll throw one out for you as well. If you read the book Brief, it's called Brief. It
No.
says make a bigger impact by saying less. I'm giving you one and giving
Oh.
the audience one. It's my favorite book that I try to get people to read in the business world. It's like, hey, we get so much information at us now. How do you make it less? And the book
Yeah.
does a great job of focusing on that. And I'm like,
I should.
that's a skill we all could benefit from someone who can ramble as good as anyone. I do benefit from someone saying, focus. What is the
Yeah.
minimum amount you need to get this across? And there's something really cool about it. Okay, final question here. We're getting to our time. And I am a movie buff. I'm a TV film. Like I'm a big fan. I try to get people to think about this. I'm going to stall for a minute here while you think. But is there a movie that has a life lesson that you've taken away that's become part of something you've seen? So movie, TV show can go. We can go book too, of course. But we think about movies. They all have a purpose, they have a plot, they have characters that have motivation, and there's often a learning moment in these movies. Is there one that you can think of, being put on the spot, that has a
Oh, wow.
lesson in life?
Man, okay. So a lot of the movies that I like are super cheesy, like
Love it.
Marvel and again Fast and the Furious series, James Bond,
Lovely.
stuff like that. So I think
Is it a family reference from the Fast and the Furious?
it could be, but I think
It could be.
so. It could be. One of the shows that we're rewatching right now is White Collar. Now, for those that have seen White Collar, it is essentially a former convicted bond forger basically gets put into the FBI
Yep.
custody, and they have to solve crimes. The reason I really like it, and also kind of Sherlock Holmes is similar, is that both of those teach you the lesson is to think outside of the box. And that's always been super important in how I like to approach problems. Often when others zig, I zag. And so a little bit of thinking laterally of, look, that's the
Nice.
simplest answer isn't always the easiest answer, and things will go wrong. So what happens when it goes wrong? How do you adjust on the fly? And so I think White Collar and Sherlock Holmes are two shows and movies that I think have taught me to think a little bit more outside the box.
I love it. In fact, White Collar is a funny one in that my daughter was getting into art and she was 11, and that show was something that we were like, hey,
Yeah.
this has some art elements to it. And it works for 11-year-old girls, surprisingly. So they're big
There you
fans
go.
of the Neil Cafferty in there. So FYI, good choice. Thinking outside the box, always a good thing. Armaan, any final words to colleagues, people moving up, the sports world, anything else you want to get out there, anything you want to talk about and coming up in your world? Kind of last thoughts here.
Yeah, I mean, the thing I would say is, you know, one of the most pieces of advice I like to try to give is, look, your network will be the best thing that you can own, manage, and run. And if you
Ooh, I
can
like the
do
word
that,
manage in there. I like that a lot.
it will set you up for success. I've been fortunate that I've been called and asked to work at a lot of places, and it's because of the great relationships where, look, creating a relationship is very easy. Maintaining one, that's where the challenge is. And so that's why I say managing it and thinking about it, not necessarily in a bad way, but in a positive way where you become friends. I mean, part of the reason I'm doing this is part in parcel because of my relationship with Moon that's developed over the years where I've got to know him. And he asked me to do this. And I said, yeah, of course I'd love to, you know, create a course with you on this sort of thing. So yeah, I think your network is one of the most important pieces of your career that will help you. And I think that's what I would end with.
Armaan, first, thank you so much for being on the new podcast. Second, thank you so much for building a course with us. Your course has been super popular. Partnership analytics is a very interesting one. And yours is one of those courses that every video I watch, I'm like, "Oh, that's good. That's another point I need to know." So I really do appreciate it. And then just even some of the handouts and stuff that go with it in the PDF form, I really like the way it turned out. So thank you for that. And as we go forward, anything we can do for you, let us know. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining another episode of our Learning Lever podcast. We'll see you next time. If you enjoyed what you heard, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Thank you for listening to the Learning Lever.